The canyon walls echoed with silence as Sarah Lockwood stumbled forward, her cracked lips parched beyond pain. 3 days without water in the merciless Arizona territory of 1885 had left her delirious, a settler woman far from home. When she collapsed beneath a twisted juniper, the renowned Apache medicine man Tall Hawk found her, following not tracks but the whispers of ancestor spirits. With weathered hands, he applied sacred herbs to her wounds, singing healing songs as old as the mountains themselves. What began as rescue transformed into something deeper, a shared calling to protect the canyon's ancient remedies from those who would steal nature's gifts for profit. How could two people from worlds so different overcome centuries of bloodshed to defend something greater than themselves? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Lockwood had never imagined dying alone in a wilderness of red stone and merciless sky. The leather-bound journal clutched to her chest, its pages filled with meticulous botanical sketches and personal reflections, now seemed a foolish indulgence rather than the scientific record she had intended. 6 days earlier, the stagecoach had rattled along the rutted trail toward Arizona's promised lands. Sarah sat straight-backed despite the jolting, her Boston-tailored traveling suit already gathering the persistent dust that infiltrated everything in this territory. At 26, she was considered past marriageable prime in proper society, a fact her father's business partner, Thaddeus Montgomery, had used to press his advantage in proposing an arrangement that had more to do with her father's medical practice than any affection. "You'll be comfortable as Mrs. Montgomery," her aunt had insisted after her father's funeral. What else is there for a woman alone? What else indeed? Sarah had wondered as she sorted through her father's effects, his medical books, botanical specimens, and the journal in which he documented remedies both conventional and experimental. Dr. William Lockwood had been considered eccentric for allowing his daughter to assist in his practice, teaching her plant identification, basic surgical techniques, and patient care despite society's disapproval. "The healing arts belong to anyone with the heart to learn them," he'd told her. "Man or woman makes no difference to the suffering." Those lessons had ended with consumption's relentless assault on his lungs. Sarah had nursed him until the end, applying every remedy in his journals, watching helplessly as each failed. After his passing, Montgomery had given her 3 months of appropriate mourning before presenting his proposal, along with the news that her father had left significant debts. "I've already acquired his practice," Montgomery had explained, twisting the waxed end of his mustache. "Acquiring his daughter seems the natural progression." Sarah had nodded demurely, packed her father's journals and essential belongings that night, and boarded the westbound train the following morning with the small inheritance her mother had left in trust. Her destination, the Arizona Territory, where her father's colleague, Dr. Abernathy, had once invited her father to join his practice in the growing frontier town of Mineral Springs. The stagecoach attack came without warning. One moment they were creaking through a narrow pass, the next filled with the thunder of gunshots and panicked horses. Sarah remembered little beyond the driver's cry cut short, the sickening lurch as the coach careened off the trail, and her own body being thrown clear as it toppled. She had awakened alone, dazed, a gash on her forehead crusted with blood and sand. For 3 days she had wandered, following what she believed was the direction of Mineral Springs. Her canteen, cracked in the fall, had leaked its precious contents within the first day. The remaining water sources she encountered were brackish pools, unfit for drinking. By the 4th day, the canyon walls began to dance with mirages, phantom waters, imagined settlements, and finally, her father's disappointed face. "You were meant for greater purpose, Sarah," the mirage admonished as she stumbled through an endless maze of stone, "not to die unnamed in this forsaken place." On the third day, the twisted juniper had offered rare shade. Sarah sank beneath, its gnarled branches, her lips bleeding, her throat too parched to swallow the bitter saliva coating her tongue. She opened her journal one last time, forcing cramped fingers to write, "The canyon holds both death and life in equal measure. I wonder which it has chosen for me." Then darkness claimed her, the journal slipping from nerveless fingers to the red dust below. Her last conscious thought was of distant drums, though whether they beat in the physical world or merely in the veiling rhythm of her heart, she could not tell. Tall Hawk moved through the canyon with the fluid grace of one born to its rhythms. At 52 summers, his face was a landscape of deep lines etched by sun and wisdom, his eyes dark pools reflecting generations of knowledge. The eagle feather medicine bundle at his side contained healing tools passed down from father to son. For more cycles than any living memory could recall, the people called him Goyawe Jiu Gai, medicine man of the White Mountain, though he preferred the simple name his father had given him when, as a boy of 7 summers, he had climbed the highest peak in their territory and spotted a hawk circling near the sun. That day, his father had nodded solemnly. "The spirits have shown you your path. You will see far, like the Tall Hawk." Now, decades later, Tall Hawk followed unseen trails through the sacred canyons, gathering the herbs that flowered in hidden places known only to those with the ancient songs in their blood. His fingers, nimble despite their weathered appearance, carefully harvested only what was needed, leaving the strongest plants to reseed, as the ancestors had taught. 3 nights ago, while sleeping beneath the stars at the sacred spring, Tall Hawk had dreamed of a strange disruption in the canyon's spirit. In the dream, foreign footsteps disturbed the delicate balance of the land, yet these steps were different from the usual intrusion of white settlers or soldiers. The ancestor spirits whispered of a crossroads, a meeting that must occur. "Shiu, Chidi," he had murmured upon waking, "my spirits," knowing the dream carried obligation. Against the advice of tribal elders who counseled avoiding all contact with the white settlers, whose numbers grew with each season, Tall Hawk had set out to follow the dream's guidance. The tribal council had grown increasingly concerned about white encroachment. Just last moon, scouts had reported survey markers appearing near the sacred medicine caves. "Inda," the chief had warned, "enemies." Speaking of miners searching for silver and copper in the mountains, of the railroad surveyors planning to cut iron paths through ancient gathering grounds, Tall Hawk understood these dangers. 3 summers passed. His cousin's family had been relocated at gunpoint when gold was discovered near their winter camp. The soldiers had called it progress as they escorted the band to the newly established reservation, where poor soil and scarce water made traditional ways nearly impossible to maintain. Yet something in this dream felt different. The ancestors rarely spoke without purpose, and they had shown him a specific juniper tree twisted by centuries of wind into the form of a dancing woman. As he approached the landmark, Tall Hawk sensed a disturbance, not danger, but imbalance, like the air before a thunderstorm. He moved cautiously, singing softly the protection song his grandfather had taught him. The white woman lay crumpled beneath the juniper, her skin blistered by sun, lips cracked and bleeding. Death hovered close. Tall Hawk knelt beside her, noting the strange book clutched in her hands, filled with drawings of plants, some he recognized from his own healing work. He touched her forehead, feeling the hot dryness of severe water sickness. Without intervention, her spirit would join the ancestors before the sun completed its journey. Tall Hawk removed his medicine bundle, unwrapping the doe skin to reveal small pouches of herbs, a carved bone needle, sinew thread, and the sacred eagle feather used to direct healing energy. "Ta yi hehe shimanahast-zan," he whispered, "thank you deeply, Mother Earth," as he began to gather what was needed for the woman's treatment. The ancestors had led him here for a purpose, Whether that purpose was merely to ease her passing or to begin something the dream had not fully revealed remained to be seen. The canyon knew. The canyon always knew. Sarah awakened to the scent of smoke and herbs, a fragrance both foreign and oddly comforting. For a moment, she thought herself back in her father's study, where dried plants hung from ceiling beams. Then pain reasserted itself, her cracked lips, sunburned skin, and the deep ache of dehydration, and memory returned in fragments. The stagecoach, the attack, the endless wandering. She opened her eyes to unfamiliar surroundings, a small shelter of branches and animal hides, a fire smouldering nearby, and seated cross-legged beside it, a native man watching her with deep, evaluative eyes. Terror seized her briefly before rational thought prevailed. Had he meant her harm, she would not have awakened at all. "Water!" she croaked, the word barely recognizable through her damaged throat. The man nodded once, reaching for a clay vessel. He supported her head with surprising gentleness, helping her drink in small sips from a wooden ladle. The water tasted of minerals and unfamiliar herbs, but soothed her parched tissues. When she'd taken enough, he eased her back onto what she now realized was a bed of fragrant grasses covered with a softened hide. "Thank you," she managed, gesturing. To indicate the water, the shelter, he touched his chest. "Tall hawk." The English words carried a musical accent, but were clearly understandable. "Sarah." She mirrored his gesture. "Sarah Lockwood." He nodded again, then reached for something beside the fire. Her journal, she realized with a surge of relief. He opened it, pointing to a detailed sketch of Yarrow she had copied from her father's books. "Twochin," he said, then pointed outside. Yarrow. Sarah's eyes widened. Not only had he recognized her drawing, but he knew the English name. Understanding dawned. He was a healer like her father. Despite their vast cultural differences, they shared the common language of medicinal plants. Tall Hawk rose and disappeared briefly, returning with a small bundle of the very plant from her drawing. He crumbled the dried flowers into a stone mortar, added water, and ground them with practiced movements. The resulting paste he applied to her sunburned face and arms with careful fingers. "Yarrow," she said, recognizing the cooling sensation. "For burns and wounds." He inclined his head, approval warming his expression. Then he touched his throat and made a drinking motion before offering a different cup containing dark liquid. Sarah hesitated only briefly before accepting. Her father had often said that indigenous peoples possessed medicinal knowledge that Western doctors were too arrogant to recognize. The tea was bitter but not unpleasant, and almost immediately she felt her swollen throat begin to ease. "You saved my life," she said, knowing he might not understand her words, but hoping her tone conveyed her gratitude. As strength gradually returned over the next hours, Sarah was able to sit up and observe her surroundings more carefully. The camp was situated in a protected alcove of the canyon wall, invisible from below. A small spring trickled nearby, life-giving water in this arid landscape. Various plants hung drying from the shelter's frame, and she recognized several from her father's pharmacopoeia. When Tall Hawk stepped away to tend the fire, Sarah opened her journal again, finding the last entry she'd written before collapsing. Beneath it she added, "Rescued by medicine man called Tall Hawk. Despite what we're taught about savage Indians, he has shown only kindness and remarkable healing skill. Father would say Providence has placed me in knowledgeable hands." Little did she know how prophetic those words would prove, or how completely her life's path was about to change with the arrival of a gleaming silver claim stake driven into the heart of the canyon's sacred ground. By the third day, Sarah could stand without dizziness. Tall Hawk had proven to be a patient teacher, pointing to objects and naming them first in Apache, then in his limited English. She learned that his knowledge of English came from a missionary who had lived near his people years ago, a man who had respected their healing traditions enough to exchange medical knowledge rather than merely condemn their heathen practices. That morning, Tall Hawk indicated it was time for Sarah to accompany him gathering herbs. He handed her a small woven basket and led her along nearly invisible paths through the canyon. At each stop, he demonstrated proper harvesting techniques, which plants to take, which to leave, how to cut without harming the root system, and always the quiet songs or prayers he offered before taking anything from the earth. "Medicine stronger with thanks," he explained simply when he caught her watching him. Sarah nodded, remembering her father's similar philosophy. "My father said our intention affects our remedies," she replied, unsure how much he understood. He believed healing required respect for plants, for patience, for knowledge itself. Tall Hawk's expression softened slightly. "Your father, medicine man?" "Yes," Sarah smiled. "A doctor, a healer. He taught me." Their quiet exchange was interrupted by distant voices echoing through the canyon. Tall Hawk immediately tensed, pulling Sarah into the shadow of an overhanging rock. He placed one finger against his lips, then pointed to a ridge above them. 3 men on horseback appeared against the sky, their forms silhouetted by the morning sun. The lead rider pointed across the canyon, gesturing emphatically. Even from this distance, something about his posture seemed disturbingly familiar to Sarah. "Montgomery Mining Company is going to own this whole territory by year's end," the man's voice carried clearly in the still air. "These initial claims are just the beginning. Once we establish the main operation, we'll expand through every branch of this canyon system." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Thaddeus Montgomery, here, in this remote wilderness. The coincidence seemed impossible, yet the voice was unmistakable. One of the other riders spoke. "The army says there's Apache still using these canyons for their ceremonies. They won't take kindly to blasting." Montgomery's dismissive laugh echoed off the stone walls. "The army's relocating them to the reservation by summer's end. President's orders. Progress doesn't wait for superstition, Jenkins. There's silver here worth millions, and I mean to have it." The third rider pointed downward. "There's water in that southwest branch, good for processing operations." "Excellent. Place a claim stake there as well. We'll divert the entire flow if necessary." Sarah felt Tall Hawk stiffen beside her. His face remained impassive, but she sensed the anger in his stillness. The water source the miners coveted was likely crucial to the plant life of the entire canyon ecosystem. The riders moved on, their voices fading. When they had disappeared, Tall Hawk led Sarah quickly back toward camp, their gathering interrupted. His pace was brisk, urgent. "Those men," Sarah said as they walked. "The leader, I know him." Tall Hawk stopped, turning to face her with an unreadable expression. "His name is Thaddeus Montgomery. He was my father's business partner in Boston." She swallowed hard. "He wanted to marry me after my father died. That's partly why I left." Tall Hawk studied her face, perhaps looking for deception. "He brings destruction to sacred places," he finally said. "Many moons, my people gather medicine. Here, before my father, before his father." The full implications suddenly dawned on Sarah. "The spring near your camp, is it the water source they want to divert?" His single nod confirmed her fears. "I'm sorry," she said, the words painfully inadequate against the weight of the threat. "Perhaps I can speak to him, explain the importance." Tall Hawk's bitter laugh cut her short. "White men not listen about sacred, only understand gold, silver." He pointed to the silver claim stake they'd passed earlier, driven deep into the red earth like an invasion. "This, their medicine." The days that followed brought new routines as Sarah's strength returned. Each morning, she accompanied Tall Hawk on gathering expeditions, learning to identify plants she'd only seen in books, alongside others entirely new to her. A torn map of canyon territories, marked with symbols indicating sacred sites and gathering locations, became her study guide in the evenings. "This mark, sacred spring," Tall Hawk explained, pointing to a spiral symbol. "This, cave where sunherbs grow." He traced a zigzag path through the canyon system. "Mining men plan dig here, here, here," he said, his finger landing on several spots marked with red ochre, each dangerously close to the sacred gathering sites. As Sarah's understanding of Apache plant medicine grew, so did her concern about Montgomery's plans. The canyon wasn't merely beautiful. It was a living pharmacy, with species she suspected might be unknown to Western medicine. If Montgomery diverted the water sources or blasted through the rock formations, entire plant ecosystems could be destroyed before their healing properties were even documented. One morning, while carefully harvesting a rare lichen tall hawk used for treating infections, Sarah spotted movement on the ridge above. A young Apache man watched them with undisguised suspicion. "Little Raven," Tall Hawk explained when he noticed her unease. "My sister's son. He studies medicine ways." He sighed. "Not happy I teach white woman." Little Raven descended the steep path with the sure-footedness of one born to the canyon. He spoke rapidly to Tall Hawk in Apache, occasionally gesturing towards Sarah with barely concealed hostility. Though she couldn't understand the words, the message was clear. She didn't belong here. Tall Hawk responded calmly but firmly. The exchange ended with Little Raven giving Sarah a final distrustful glance before continuing down the canyon, his back stiff with disapproval. "He says, 'I betray Apache ways,'" Tall Hawk translated simply. "Says white people only take, never give back to Earth." Sarah's cheeks burned with shame, not for herself but for the truth in the accusation. "He's not wrong about many white people," she admitted. "But I'm not here to take, Tall Hawk. I want to learn, to understand." He studied her face, his expression softening slightly. "I know, the spirits led me to you for purpose." He gestured toward her journal. "You write plant medicines, good. Some plants dying as white man changes land. Knowledge must continue." That evening, as they worked side by side, preparing dried herbs, Sarah noticed Tall Hawk watching her technique with interest as she ground juniper berries with precise, measured movements. "Your hands know medicine way," he observed. "My father taught me proper preparation affects potency," she explained. "Too much grinding releases oils that evaporate. Too little fails to release enough medicine." Tall Hawk nodded approvingly. "Same teaching from my father." He hesitated, then reached for a small clay medicine bowl decorated with ancient symbols. "This bowl, 7 generations of healers. Tonight you use." The significance of the gesture wasn't lost on Sarah. This wasn't merely a tool, it was a sacred vessel representing an unbroken line of healing knowledge. Her hands trembled slightly as she accepted it. "I'm honored," she said simply, knowing more elaborate expressions of gratitude would ring false. As moonlight illuminated the small camp, Sarah worked with newfound purpose, carefully documenting each preparation in her journal. Alongside her father's precise medical terminology, she now added Apache names and uses, creating a bridge between worlds that had previously existed apart. What neither she nor Tall Hawk could know was that Little Raven had traveled to the trading post that day, where rumors of a kidnapped white woman were spreading, rumors that would soon bring new dangers to their fragile sanctuary. A fortnight passed, marked by daily gathering expeditions that ventured deeper into the canyon system. On a crisp morning, Tall Hawk led Sarah along a treacherous path that spiraled upward along the canyon wall. After an hour's careful climbing, they reached a hidden cave entrance, barely visible behind a curtain of hanging vines. "Most sacred place," Tall Hawk explained solemnly. "Cave of ancestors. Only medicine people may enter." Sarah hesitated at the threshold. "Should I wait outside?" Tall Hawk considered her question, his weathered face revealing the weight of tradition, warring with immediate necessity. "Ancestors speak of time when knowledge must find new keepers," he finally said. "You show respect for plants, for canyon. You may enter. First, white person." The cave's interior took Sarah's breath away. Shafts of sunlight penetrated through cracks in the ceiling, illuminating walls adorned with ancient pictographs depicting human figures gathering plants. In the center, natural stone formations created terraced pools where water collected from a tiny spring dripping steadily from above. Around these pools grew plants unlike any Sarah had seen in the canyon below, delicate, luminous blue flowers with translucent stems that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "Star medicine," Tallhawk said reverently, kneeling beside the nearest pool, "grows nowhere else, heals deepest wounds, body and spirit." He demonstrated the proper gathering technique, singing softly as he carefully cut just 3 blooms, leaving the roots and surrounding plants undisturbed. "If mining men find this place—" Sarah couldn't finish the sentence. "All die," Tallhawk completed simply. "Cannot grow elsewhere. Many generations try." That evening, as they descended to the main camp, a distant rumble echoed through the canyon. Tallhawk froze, his expression darkening. "Dynamite," he said grimly. "Montgomery men begin work." When they reached camp, they found Little Raven waiting, his previous hostility replaced by urgent concern. He spoke rapidly to Tallhawk, who translated for Sarah. "Soldiers at trading post. Ask questions about white woman lost from stage. Montgomery offers reward for information." Sarah felt cold fear settle in her stomach. "They think I've been kidnapped." Little Raven watched her with new assessment in his eyes as Tallhawk continued translating his words. "My cousin Painted Horse says soldiers prepare to search canyons. Mining company men guide them." "I need to go to them," Sarah said immediately. "Explain that I'm here willingly, that you saved my life." Tallhawk shook his head. "Montgomery not want truth, want canyon. If soldiers take you back, say Apache. Steal white woman, they have reason to remove all people from sacred lands. But surely, if I explain, white soldiers not believe white woman choose stay with Apache," Little Raven interrupted in halting English, surprising them both. "Say we spirit magic you." He made a gesture near his head, clearly searching. For a word, bewitch." That night, unable to sleep, Sarah wrote in her journal by firelight, "I find myself in an impossible position. To return to white society might save Tallhawk from accusations of kidnapping, but would certainly doom the sacred places he's shown me. To stay means living as a fugitive, yet continuing to learn healing knowledge that might otherwise be lost forever. What would Father say? He always believed knowledge was sacred, regardless of its source." She looked up to find Tallhawk watching her from across the fire, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "teach you. Medicine for bullet wounds. Soon needed, I think." Sarah nodded, understanding the grim reality behind his words. Whatever choice she made, conflict was coming to the canyon, conflict that would require all their combined healing knowledge to survive. 6 months transformed Sarah more than the previous 26 years combined. The proper Boston physician's daughter now moved through the canyon with quiet confidence, her skin sun-bronzed, her hands calloused from daily work. She wore a practical combination of her own modified clothing and Apache garments, long skirts better suited to gathering, expeditions, moccasins that moved silently across stone, and a fringed leather vest Tallhawk's sister had presented to her after Sarah helped deliver her healthy baby boy. Sarah's pressed flower collection filled nearly half her journal now, each specimen meticulously preserved with both Western and Apache names noted, along with medicinal properties and preparation methods. What had begun as scientific documentation had evolved into something more meaningful, a bridge between healing traditions that honored both while diminishing neither. "Sunflower root, good for snake bite," Little Raven explained as they worked, together preparing remedies. The young man's initial hostility had gradually yielded to grudging respect after Sarah correctly identified a rare fungus even he had overlooked. "But must harvest when moon is new, or medicine sleeps." Sarah nodded. adding this detail to her notes. In Western medicine, timing of harvest isn't considered important, she remarked. We might be missing crucial aspects of plant properties. Little Raven allowed a rare smile. White medicine sometimes sees with one eye closed. Their companionable work was interrupted by a distant explosion that sent birds scattering into the sky. Such disruptions had become increasingly common as Montgomery Mining Company expanded operations in the western branch of the canyon, each blast a painful reminder of the approaching threat. That evening, as Sarah helped prepare the evening meal, she noticed Tall Hawk watching her with an intensity that sent unexpected warmth through her chest. Their months of working side by side had created a bond that transcended their different worlds. A connection neither acknowledged aloud, yet both felt with increasing force. The people speak of you with respect now, Tall Hawk said as they ate. Beneath the stars, they call you Twochenbeastzum, medicine plant woman. Sarah smiled, honored by the name. And what do you call me in your thoughts, Tall Hawk? The question slipped out before propriety could restrain it. Something flickered in his dark eyes, something that made her heart quicken. But before he could answer, Little Raven appeared from the darkness, his expression urgent. Indar, he reported, docilely. Enemies, Tall Hawk rose immediately. How many? 3 riders. White men, not soldiers. They make camp in South Bend. Sarah felt cold fear replace the warmth of moments before. Montgomery's men? Little Raven nodded. One wears silver star, like mining stakes. Thaddeus himself, Sarah murmured. He wouldn't. Send scouts if he's come personally. He must be planning something significant. Tall Hawk's face remained impassive, but Sarah had learned to read the subtle tension in his shoulders, the slight narrowing of his eyes that signaled deep concern. Tomorrow we go to Spring Caves, he decided. Gather what medicine we can before. They find sacred places? He turned to Sarah, his gaze softening slightly. You should not be seen, too dangerous. I'm coming with you, she replied firmly. I've spent months learning. I won't hide now when my knowledge might help. Their eyes held in silent communication, respect, concern, and something deeper passing between them. Finally, Tall Hawk nodded. Once, we leave before dawn, he said. Little Raven, tell your cousins watch mining men. Follow, but stay hidden. Later, alone by the small fire outside her shelter, Sarah opened the silver locket containing her parents' miniature portraits. Her last tangible connection to her former life. The faces that had once represented everything familiar now seemed to belong to a different world entirely, viewed across a chasm of experience that could never be recrossed. "I've found my purpose, Father," she whispered to the small image. "Though I doubt you ever imagined it would be here, among people you never knew existed. The first confrontation came sooner than expected." 3 days after sighting Montgomery's party, Sarah and Tall Hawk were gathering rare fungi that grew only in the shadow of certain rock formations when gunshots echoed through the canyon. They exchanged a single glance before gathering their baskets and moving swiftly toward the sound. They found the aftermath near the lower spring, 2 Apache men and a mining company guard, all wounded. Little Raven was already there, pressing a cloth against his cousin's bleeding shoulder. "Mining man tried to place stake at sacred water," Little Raven explained tersely. "Painted horse tried to stop. Guard shoot. Painted horse's brother shoot back. The mining guard lay semi-conscious, blood seeping from a wound in his thigh where an arrow had struck. The second Apache warrior had a graze across his ribs. Without hesitation, Sarah knelt beside the nearest wounded man, the guard, and began examining his injury. The arrow had penetrated deeply, but appeared to have missed the major artery. "What you do?" Little Raven demanded, clearly shocked. "He, enemy. He's wounded," Sarah replied simply, opening her medicine pouch. "As are your kinsmen. I'll treat them all." Tall Hawk watched her with quiet approval before moving to assist the Apache warriors. They worked in tandem, applying poultices to clean the wounds, administering pain-relieving teas, and binding injuries with skilled hands. When they had stabilized all three men, Sarah addressed the now conscious guard. "Can you ride?" The man nodded weakly, eyeing them with confusion. "You're that missing woman, Lockwood. Montgomery's got a reward out for you." "I wasn't kidnapped," Sarah stated firmly. "These people saved my life. Now we've saved yours. Return to your camp and tell them what happened here today." "Why'd you help me?" the guard asked, bewilderment clear in his pain-dulled eyes. "Because healing doesn't choose sides," she answered. "Remember that when Montgomery asks about the Apache." The incident changed something in the tribe's perception of Sarah. Word spread quickly of how Medicine Plant Woman had treated friend and foe alike. While some elders grumbled about aiding enemies, most recognized the power of her action. By demonstrating mercy toward an adversary, she had shown herself truly worthy of the healing knowledge they had shared. A week later, during a gathering expedition near the canyon's eastern edge, they encountered a cavalry patrol led by a lieutenant, with thoughtful eyes and a carefully neutral expression. "Miss Lockwood?" he inquired, raising his hand to halt his men's immediate reach for weapons. "Lieutenant James Cooper, 7th Cavalry. You've caused quite a stir. Half the territory thinks you're dead. The other half thinks you're captive." "As you can see, Lieutenant, I'm neither," Sarah replied calmly, though her heart raced. "I choose to be here." Cooper studied her, then Tall Hawk, his gaze shrewd but not hostile. "Montgomery has the governor's ear. He's pushing for a military solution to what he calls the Apache problem in these canyons. The only problem is Montgomery's greed," Sarah stated. "These canyons contain healing plants found nowhere else, knowledge that could benefit everyone if preserved." Something in her words seemed to resonate with the lieutenant. He dismounted, approaching until Tall Hawk tensed visibly. "My mother was Cheyenne," Cooper said quietly. "She used plant medicines the army doctors dismissed, saved my life during fever when I was 10. He glanced at Tall Hawk. "I'm under orders to relocate any Apache found outside reservation boundaries, but I don't recall seeing anyone matching that description today." The implication was clear. Cooper was offering temporary blind eye to their presence. "The mining company plans to divert the spring that feeds the entire southwestern canyon," Sarah told him. "That would destroy ecosystems that have existed for thousands of years." Cooper nodded thoughtfully. "Water rights are complicated legal matters. Might require official surveys before any diversion could be approved." He mounted his horse again. "Such surveys could take months, possibly longer, if the paperwork were to be misplaced occasionally." As the patrol departed, Tall Hawk gave Sarah a questioning look. "An ally," she explained. "Not all who wear that uniform think alike." "Like not all Apache think alike," Tall Hawk replied with rare humor. "And not all white. Women belong in Boston drawing rooms." 2 weeks after their encounter with Lieutenant Cooper, Sarah noticed unusual activity at the canyon's eastern entrance. A single rider in civilian clothes, not military, not mining company, accompanied by Cooper himself. "Someone comes," she informed Tall Hawk, who was preparing a complicated poultice for the tribal chief's arthritic joints. Through Cooper's field glass, borrowed during their last encounter, Sarah observed the stranger. An older gentleman in an Eastern-cut suit, entirely out of place in the rugged landscape. Something about his posture struck her as familiar. "Mr. Hargrove," she whispered in disbelief, recognizing her father's longtime solicitor. Tall Hawk sensed her shock. "You know this man?" "My father's lawyer. From Boston." Sarah lowered the glass, her mind racing. How could he possibly be here? They watched as Cooper led the man to a small clearing below, clearly visible from their position, but offering privacy from other ears. The lieutenant raised a white handkerchief, the signal they had arranged for urgent but non-threatening communication. "It could be a trap," Little Raven warned when Sarah prepared to descend. "Cooper has proven trustworthy," she replied, though uncertainty fluttered in her chest. "And Hargrove was my father's friend for 30 years. Tall Hawk studied the men. "Below. I come with you. Stay hidden. Watch. The descent took 20 minutes. When Sarah emerged into the clearing, Hargrove's weathered face registered shock, then profound relief. "Miss Lockwood, thank Providence!" The elderly lawyer rushed forward, propriety forgotten as he clasped her hands. "When Lieutenant Cooper's letter reached me, I could scarcely believe it." "Letter?" Sarah looked questioningly at Cooper. The lieutenant nodded. "After our meeting, I made inquiries. Mr. Hargrove has been searching for you since you disappeared from the Boston train station." Hargrove produced a leather portfolio from his saddlebag. "I've been trying to locate you for nearly 8 months, my dear. Your father's final affairs." He hesitated, glancing at Cooper. "Perhaps we might speak privately." "Lieutenant Cooper and the Apache have my complete trust," Sarah stated firmly. "Whatever you've come to say can be said before them." She signaled toward the rocks where Tall Hawk watched, inviting him to join them. Hargrove's eyes widened at Tall Hawk's appearance, but to his credit, he recovered quickly and gave a respectful nod before continuing. "Very well. The matter concerns your inheritance, Miss Lockwood." He removed a legal document bearing multiple seals. "Your father's complete will was held in trust to be executed 1 year after his death. That time came 3 months ago." Sarah stared at the document, bewildered. "I received my inheritance, the trust from my mother." "That was merely a portion," Hargrove explained. "The remainder was your father's controlling interest in Montgomery Mining Company." The words struck Sarah like physical blows. "That's impossible. Montgomery owned the company. He was managing partner, yes, but your father was primary investor and majority shareholder." Hargrove's expression softened with sympathy. Dr. Lockwood never approved of Montgomery's methods, but believed he could moderate them through financial influence. When your father's illness progressed, Montgomery began operating more independently, knowing the doctor couldn't oversee operations. Sarah's world tilted beneath her, all these months fighting to protect the canyon from Montgomery, when legally, "I own the company that's destroying the sacred lands," she whispered. From the rocks came a sharp intake of breath. Tall Hawk emerged fully, his face a rigid mask. "You own mining company?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "I didn't know," Sarah said desperately. "I swear to you, Tall Hawk, I had no idea." The Apache healer stared at her, centuries of betrayal reflected in his eyes. Without a word, he turned and disappeared into the canyon. "Tall Hawk," Sarah called after him, but Cooper caught her arm. "Give him time," the lieutenant advised. "This is unexpected for everyone." Hargrove looked between them, confusion evident. "I don't understand. Is this good news or bad?" Sarah turned back to the lawyer, sudden resolve hardening within her. "Mr. Hargrove, as legal owner of Montgomery Mining Company, I need to know exactly what powers I have, and how quickly I can exercise them." Sarah didn't find Tall Hawk until nightfall. He sat alone at the highest point of the canyon rim, a silhouette against the star-filled sky. She approached slowly, giving him ample opportunity to send her away if he wished. When he remained silent, she sat beside him, careful to maintain respectful distance. "I had no knowledge of my father's investment," she said quietly. "I would never have concealed such a thing from you," Tall Hawk continued, gazing at the stars. "I believe you," he finally said, his voice low and measured. "But this changes nothing. Montgomery will not surrender power easily, even to rightful owner?" "No," Sarah agreed. "But it gives us a chance we didn't have before." She removed an Apache protection amulet from her pocket, a gift from the tribal elder whose life she had saved with a difficult surgery. "The tribal council sent this. Even knowing about the mining company, they still consider me a friend." Tall Hawk took the amulet, examining it in the moonlight. "Elder Grey Mountain has dreamed of you," he revealed. "Says you walk between two worlds for purpose, that both spirits claim you." He returned the amulet, his fingers briefly touching hers, the first contact since the revelation. The simple gesture communicated forgiveness more clearly than words. "We must move quickly," Sarah continued. Hargrove says Montgomery has been operating the company with limited legal authority since my father's death. Once I formally claim ownership, I can halt the mining operations, but we need documentation of all sacred sites and unique plant species to establish permanent protection. How long? 3 days before Hargrove can file the legal papers, then perhaps 2 more before Montgomery receives official notification. Tall Hawk nodded grimly. 5 days to document what took my ancestors generations to learn. He rose in one fluid motion. We begin at dawn. I will gather the medicine people from 3 bands. Little Raven can guide them to different canyon sections. As they descended to the camp, Sarah outlined her plan. I've been compiling a comprehensive record of medicinal plants and their locations. If we can prove the canyon contains unique species essential for healing, particularly any that might benefit Western medicine, we can petition for protected status under the new federal conservation statutes. For the first time that evening, Tall Hawk's expression lightened. The star medicine from Sacred Cave. Exactly. Mr. Hargrove believes the federal land commissioner might be sympathetic, especially with Lieutenant Cooper's support. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. 3 Apache medicine women and 2 elders from neighboring bands, summoned by Tall Hawk's messengers during the night. Each carried gathering baskets and medicine pouches. Most remarkably, they brought samples of rare plants from distant parts of the canyon system. The oldest, a dignified woman whose face mapped a lifetime of wisdom, placed a withered hand on Sarah's cheek. "You medicine plant woman," she stated in halting English. "Grey Mountains say you protect sacred herbs. We help." Sarah blinked back tears at this profound demonstration of trust. The woman pressed something into her palm, a small clay bead carved with an ancient spiral symbol from time before Apache. The elder explained. "Medicine people always protect plants. Now you continue." Over the next 2 days, their small band worked tirelessly, mapping and documenting. Sarah's journal filled with detailed sketches, pressed specimens, and careful notes combining Apache wisdom with Western scientific classification. Lieutenant Cooper provided military survey maps on which they marked the precise locations of gathering sites and rare species. On the 3rd morning, distant explosions shook the canyon walls. "Montgomery grows impatient," Tall Hawk observed grimly. "He senses something has changed." Sarah looked up from her documentation work, determination hardening her features. "We still need to record the high caves. The star medicine is our strongest evidence. It exists nowhere else and has healing properties unlike anything in Western pharmacology." Tall Hawk nodded, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that communicated more than words. "Most dangerous journey now. Montgomery men watch trails. Then we go tonight," Sarah decided, under cover of darkness. Little Raven, who had become their most dedicated assistant, looked between them with concern. "Many guard at canyon mouth now. How pass unseen?" A slow smile spread across Tall Hawk's weathered face. "Not through canyon mouth. We go up." The ascent began in the darkest. Hour before dawn, Sarah, Tall Hawk, and Little Raven followed an ancient hunter's path that switchbacked up the sheer canyon wall, a route known only to the most experienced tribal members. Each carried minimal supplies, water, dried meat, and their medicine pouches. Sarah had her precious journal secured against her chest. Tall Hawk brought an ancient stone mortar and pestle, wrapped carefully in soft hide, essential for preparing the star medicine properly. "Path disappears ahead," Tall Hawk whispered, as they reached a section where the ledge narrowed to almost nothing. "Follow exactly. Hand here." He indicated a nearly invisible handhold in the rock face. "Foot here." Sarah swallowed her fear, focusing instead on the crucial nature of their mission. The morning star hung bright above them, seeming to guide their way as they inched along the precipice. Below, the canyon floor lay in darkness, pinpoints of light marking Montgomery's mining camp. By first light, they had reached the upper plateau, a hidden world of twisted juniper and wind-sculpted stone unseen from below. Tall Hawk oriented himself by landmarks visible only to his experienced eyes, leading them across the rugged terrain with quiet confidence. Sacred cave half-day's journey, he explained, must reach before sunset. Cave entrance only visible when afternoon sun strikes certain angle. They traveled in watchful silence, aware that Montgomery's scouts could be anywhere. Twice they froze, at the sound of distant voices, pressing themselves against sun-warmed rock until the danger passed. Near midday, Little Raven, who had been scouting ahead, returned with troubling news. "Mining men on plateau," he reported tersely. 4, maybe 5. They search methodically like they know what they seek. Tall Hawk's expression darkened. "Someone has betrayed sacred cave location." "How?" Sarah asked. "Few even among your people know of it." "Montgomery has many ways to make men talk," Tall Hawk replied grimly. "Money, whiskey, threats." They altered their route, taking a more circuitous path that added hours to their journey, but avoided the search party. The sun was already lowering when they finally approached the hidden entrance to the most sacred cave in the canyon system. As Tall Hawk had explained, the cave mouth was invisible except when illuminated by the setting sun at a precise angle. For a brief 10 minutes, light struck the red stone cliff, revealing a narrow fissure, otherwise indistinguishable from surrounding rock formations. "We must hurry," Tall Hawk urged as they squeezed through the opening. "Once sun moves, entrance disappears completely." Inside, the cave opened into a cathedral-like chamber where the mysterious blue flowers grew around, stepped pools of crystal-clear water. Sarah gasped at the sight, even more breathtaking than on her first visit. In the fading sunlight filtering through ceiling cracks, the star medicine blooms pulsed with an inner luminescence, their delicate petals seeming to float above nearly transparent stems. "Most potent when gathered at sunset," Tall Hawk explained, removing the stone mortar from his pack. "Ancient ones say stars send power to plants at this hour." With reverent movements, he harvested several blooms, placing them in the stone vessel that had been used by generations of medicine people before him. As he worked, he sang softly, the sacred gathering song that could only be performed in this place. Sarah documented everything in her journal, detailed sketches of the plants, notes on the unique growing conditions, and most importantly, observations of the plant's medicinal properties that she had previously witnessed. The star medicine had healed wounds that should have been fatal, reduced fevers that other remedies couldn't touch, and in one remarkable case, restored sight to an elder's clouded eye. "Western medicine has nothing comparable," she murmured as she wrote. "This alone should convince the land commissioner." Little Raven, keeping watch near the entrance, suddenly stiffened. "Listen," he whispered. They froze, straining to hear. Faintly at first, then growing clearer, came the sound of approaching voices and the clink of metal on stone. "They found trail," Tall Hawk said, quickly gathering the remaining specimens. "We must finish and find another way out." Sarah looked up anxiously. "Is there another exit?" Tall Hawk's expression was grim as he secured the prepared medicine. "Ancient path, dangerous even in daylight, in darkness." He left the thought unfinished. Little Raven peered through the narrowing entrance. "Sun almost gone, cave mouth disappearing. They will not find entrance easily." "Then we complete our work," Sarah decided, returning to her documentation with renewed urgency. "And pray we finish before they solve the puzzle of the disappearing doorway." The rare blue healing flower glowed with ethereal light as darkness enveloped the sacred cave. Outside, voices grew closer, Montgomery's men systematically searching the plateau, their lanterns casting long shadows against the cliff face. "They will find entrance when they shine light at correct angle," Tall Hawk warned, gathering the last of the prepared medicine into small hide pouches. Sarah closed her journal, its pages now containing the most comprehensive documentation of the star medicine ever created. "The legal papers and this evidence are our only hope of saving this place," she said. "One of us must get this journal to Lieutenant Cooper immediately." Tall Hawk and Little Raven exchanged glances. "Ancient path leads to Lower Canyon," Tall Hawk said. "Little Raven knows way. He takes journal to Soldier Chief." "I'll create a diversion," Sarah decided, a plan forming rapidly. "If I leave obvious tracks heading east, away from the sacred cave and away from Little Raven's escape route, they'll follow me instead." "Too dangerous," Tall Hawk objected. "Montgomery wants you most of all." "Exactly," Sarah replied with grim determination. "Which makes me the perfect distraction. I'm the legal owner of his company now. He won't harm me, just try to control me." She turned to Little Raven. "Can you reach Lieutenant Cooper's outpost by morning?" The young Apache nodded, solemnly. "If I travel through night." "But white woman alone." "I won't be captured easily," Sarah assured him, retrieving a small pouch from her medicine bundle. "And I have certain advantages they won't expect." Against Tall Hawk's continued objections, they formed their plan. Little Raven would take the journal and star medicine samples through the treacherous ancient path, while Sarah would create obvious tracks leading in the opposite direction. Tall Hawk would complete the sacred gathering ritual, necessary for the medicine's full potency, then follow Sarah at a distance, providing aid if needed. As Little Raven disappeared into the darkness of the rear cave passage, Sarah embraced Tall Hawk briefly. "I'll be careful," she promised. "Complete the ceremony. The medicine must be prepared properly, or all this risk means nothing." Before he could respond, she slipped out of the cave entrance, deliberately scuffing the ground, and leaving clear footprints in patches of soft earth. She worked her way around the plateau's edge, making noise just sufficient to attract attention without appearing intentional. It took less than 20 minutes for Montgomery's men to spot her tracks. Sarah heard their excited calls as they found her trail, exactly as she'd planned. She increased her pace, staying just ahead of their pursuit, drawing them steadily away from both the sacred cave and Little Raven's escape route. For nearly 2 hours, she led them on a calculated chase across the plateau, using her knowledge of the terrain to maintain distance while ensuring they didn't lose her trail. But as moonlight brightened the landscape, her pursuers gained ground. A misstep on loose shale sent her sliding down a short embankment, twisting her ankle painfully. Before she could recover, lantern light flooded over her, and rough hands pulled her to her feet. "Well, well," drawled a familiar voice. "If it isn't the long-lost Miss Lockwood." Thaddeus Montgomery stepped into the circle of light, his expensive Eastern suit incongruous against the wild backdrop. 8 years older than when she'd last seen him in Boston, his face had hardened, deep lines framing cold eyes, and a mouth that seemed permanently set in disdain. "Thaddeus," Sarah acknowledged, straightening despite her throbbing ankle. "You're a long way from Beacon Hill." "As are you, my dear." His gaze traveled over her altered appearance, the practical Apache-influenced clothing, sun-darkened skin, and calloused hands. "Though I must say, frontier life doesn't become you." "On the contrary, I've never been more myself," Sarah replied, evenly. "I understand congratulations are in order on your mining venture, though I believe there's been a recent change in ownership." Montgomery's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ah, yes. Hargrove's dramatic appearance with William's posthumous surprises. How convenient that you've resurfaced just as the company begins to show significant profit. I assure you, I had no knowledge of my father's investment until recently." "Of course not." His tone dripped with skepticism, "just as I'm sure you had no knowledge of the Apache's stockpiling weapons to attack my operation." Sarah's shock must have shown on her face, for Montgomery laughed coldly. "Oh yes, my informants are quite thorough. By sunrise, the cavalry will have all the justification they need to remove every Apache from these canyons permanently." He gestured to his men. Escort Miss Lockwood back to camp. Carefully. After all, she's my fiancée. I am not, nor will I ever be your fiancée, Sarah stated firmly. Montgomery's smile widened. We'll discuss the details of our arrangement more privately. After all, we now have a company to run together, provided you cooperate fully. Montgomery's mining camp sprawled across the canyon floor like an iron scar, tents and rough wooden structures surrounding the main shaft entrance, dynamite crates stacked beneath canvas tarps, and steam-powered equipment belching black smoke into the pristine air. Sarah sat inside the largest tent, wrists bound to a sturdy camp chair, watching through the open flap as miners prepared for the day's blasting. After her capture, she'd been brought here and placed under guard. Montgomery had left her with a patronizing promise to continue their discussion once she'd had time to consider her position rationally. That had been hours ago. Now dawnlight crept across the canyon rim, and Sarah's thoughts turned anxiously to Little Raven. Had he reached Lieutenant Cooper? Was Tall Hawk safe? The tent flap opened fully, admitting Montgomery and a bespectacled man carrying surveying equipment. The eastern cave system looks promising, the surveyor was saying, unrolling a map across a field table. Initial samples show high-grade silver ore throughout this section. His finger traced a line that made Sarah's blood run cold, directly through the sacred medicine caves. Excellent, Montgomery replied. Prepare the charges. I want blasting to begin by noon. That's our most sacred gathering site, Sarah interrupted, unable to remain silent. Unique medicinal plants grow there that exist nowhere else on Earth. Montgomery gave her a dismissive glance. Ah, awake and still clinging to Apache superstitions. How disappointing. It's not superstition, it's science, Sarah insisted. Those plants have healing properties unknown to Western medicine. Properties I've documented extensively. Yes, your mysterious documentation. Montgomery waved the surveyor away before turning his full attention to Sarah. My men found no journal or specimens on you. Where are they? Safe, Sarah replied evenly, along with evidence of my legal ownership of Montgomery Mining Company and formal requests for federal protection of these lands. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Montgomery's face. You're bluffing. Even if Hargrove filed those papers, it would take weeks for any action. Lieutenant Cooper has connections in the Territorial Governor's office, Sarah countered, and a personal interest in preserving indigenous medicine. Montgomery studied her for a long moment before his expression hardened. It doesn't matter. By the time any papers arrive, these caves will be rubble, and any unique plants will be destroyed. Mining rights supersede sentimental nonsense about weeds. He moved closer, untying her wrists but keeping a firm grip on her arm. Now let's discuss our future arrangements. Your father's controlling interest is a complication, but one easily resolved through our marriage as originally planned. I would rather die in this canyon than marry you, Sarah stated, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. Montgomery's fingers tightened painfully around her arm. That can be arranged as well, though it would be messier. Apache attacks are so unpredictable. After all, such a tragedy if the kidnapped Miss Lockwood were to perish before rescue arrived. He dragged her outside, where workers were loading dynamite onto mules for transport to the upper blasting sites. By sunset, your precious caves will be open to proper exploitation. Progress cannot be stopped by primitive sentimentality. As he spoke, Sarah scanned the canyon rim, hoping for some sign of Tall Hawk or tribal warriors. Instead, she spotted something that gave her a different kind of hope: the mineral-stained rocks near the camp's edge. During her months with Tall Hawk, she'd learned to identify the subtle coloration that indicated the presence of certain minerals. You're making a mistake, she said carefully. The real silver deposit isn't in the eastern caves. Montgomery's attention sharpened. What do you mean? During my time here, I've studied the canyon's geology alongside its plants. The richest veins run through the western branch, not the eastern caves. She gestured toward the distinctively colored rock formation. Any experienced miner would recognize those indicators. Doubt crossed Montgomery's face as he followed her gaze. "Jenkins," he called to his foreman, "take another look at those western formations." While Montgomery's attention was diverted, Sarah's fingers slipped into her dress pocket, finding the small medicine pouch she'd managed to conceal during her capture. Inside was a powder made from crushed desert toadstools. Not poisonous, but when burned it created a smoke that caused temporary disorientation and confusion. Tall Hawk had taught her its use for ceremonial purposes, but it would serve a different need now. As Montgomery turned back to her, Sarah had already formulated her escape plan. She would need to create a diversion after nightfall, when the guards were fewer and the camp's attention focused on preparing the next day's operations. If she could reach the canyon's edge by midnight, she might still prevent the destruction of the sacred caves, assuming Little Raven had successfully delivered her documentation to Lieutenant Cooper. What she couldn't know was that events were already in motion that would turn her careful planning into something far more chaotic. Night fell over the mining camp, bringing no relief from the day's heat. Sarah sat inside the supply tent where she'd been relocated, a slight improvement over her previous accommodations, as it contained mining equipment and supplies that might prove useful. A single guard dozed outside, lulled by monotony and the flask he occasionally sipped from. Sarah had spent the afternoon observing camp operations, noting the locations of dynamite storage, guard rotations, and most importantly, the poorly secured, stable area where horses were kept. Her opportunity would come with the midnight guard change, a brief window when attention inevitably wavered. As she waited, fingers working at the loosened bindings around her wrists, an unexpected commotion erupted from the main shaft entrance. Shouts of alarm were followed by men running toward the mine. From fragments of conversation, Sarah gathered that supporting timbers had begun to fail in the newly excavated section, threatening to collapse the entire shaft. "Perfect timing," she murmured, finally freeing her hands. While the camp's attention focused on the mine emergency, she removed the pouch of medicinal powder from her hidden pocket. Moving silently to the tent's rear wall, she located a small tear in the canvas and carefully widened it enough to slip through. The guard remained at his post, but had stood to watch the activity at the mine entrance. Sarah crept toward the nearest storage area where earlier she'd observed workers carelessly stacking dynamite crates. The miners' haphazard safety practices, which had horrified her, now provided her best chance for creating a larger diversion. Using flintstones she'd found in the supply tent, Sarah struck sparks onto the medicinal powder, which began to smolder. She placed the smoking preparation near several crates where she'd earlier spotted leaking nitroglycerin, then retreated quickly toward the horse enclosure. The reaction happened faster than she'd anticipated. The ceremonial smoke, designed to create disorientation during healing rituals, filled the storage area. A guard approached, coughing and disoriented. His lantern swung wildly as he stumbled, and then the world erupted. The explosion was devastating, far larger than Sarah had intended. The concussive force threw her to the ground as flames engulfed the storage area and secondary explosions tore through the camp. Men shouted in panic as fire spread rapidly among the wooden structures. Taking advantage of the chaos, Sarah scrambled to her feet and raced toward the horses, which were rearing and pulling at their tethers in terror. She managed to free one, a sturdy paint mare, and swung onto its bare back. As she guided the frightened animal toward the canyon's eastern exit, a familiar figure blocked her path. "Going somewhere, Miss Lockwood?" Montgomery stood before her, his face illuminated by the inferno behind them, a rifle in his hands. "I should have known you'd be behind this sabotage." "The explosion was an accident," Sarah replied, struggling to control the nervous horse. But the mine collapse was inevitable. You've been cutting corners on safety just as you cut corners on everything else. Montgomery raised his rifle. Get down, now! You've destroyed months of work, but you won't destroy my company. It's not your company anymore, Sarah reminded him, desperately searching for an escape route. His finger tightened on the trigger. Without you or documentation, it remains mine. A tragic mining accident is about to claim another victim. Before he could fire, a war cry echoed from the canyon rim. Tall Hawk, wearing the full ceremonial headdress of a tribal leader, stood silhouetted against the night sky. Behind him, a line of Apache warriors appeared, each holding a flaming arrow. Montgomery swung his rifle toward this new threat, giving Sarah her chance. She kicked the horse forward, charging directly at him. Surprised, he fired hastily, the bullet whistling past her head as she swerved at the last moment, nearly trampling him. Behind her, flaming arrows arced into the night sky, landing among the remaining dynamite stores. Fresh explosions rocked the camp as Sarah galloped toward the canyon wall, where Tall Hawk had already begun descending to meet her. Little Raven reached Cooper, he called, as they came together amid the chaos. Soldiers come to enforce your ownership. Papers! Relief flooded through Sarah, but it was short-lived. A shot rang out and Tall Hawk stumbled, clutching his arm. Montgomery was pursuing them, reloading as he ran. The eastern cave system, Sarah decided instantly. We can lose him in the passages. Tall Hawk nodded grimly, pressing a strip of cloth to his bleeding arm. Many paths inside, only Apache know true way. They raced toward the narrow fissure that marked the easternmost cave entrance, Montgomery's enraged shouts following them into the darkness. Behind them, the mining camp continued to burn, its flames casting long shadows that danced across the ancient canyon walls, like spirits awakened from centuries of slumber. The eastern cave system was a labyrinth of narrow passages, cathedral-like chambers, and treacherous drops. Sarah and Tall Hawk moved through the darkness with practiced coordination, she leading the way with a small torch fashioned from resinous wood, he following despite his wounded arm, occasionally providing directions in a low whisper. Passage. Divides ahead, Tall Hawk murmured. Left path circles back to canyon. Right path leads to high ledge, dangerous but good viewing point. Can we be trapped there? Sarah asked, aware of Montgomery's footsteps echoing somewhere behind them. Yes, but he not know which path we take. They chose the right passage, climbing steadily upward through increasingly narrow tunnels until they emerged onto a high ledge overlooking the burning mining camp below. The ledge was a natural balcony in the canyon wall, no more than 6 feet wide, with a sheer drop of several hundred feet to the canyon floor. Tall Hawk leaned against the rock wall, his breathing labored. Sarah examined his wound in the moonlight. The bullet had torn through muscle, but missed bone and major vessels. I need to bandage this properly, she said, tearing a strip from her underskirt. Later, Tall Hawk replied, his gaze fixed on the cave entrance. He comes. As if summoned by the words, Montgomery emerged onto the ledge, his rifle raised. His once immaculate suit was torn and soot-stained, his face a mask of fury in the moonlight. End of the line, he said coldly. I've invested too much to let you destroy everything now. Sarah stepped forward, positioning herself between Montgomery and Tall Hawk. The investment was my father's, not yours, and he never would have approved of destroying sacred lands or threatening innocent people. Innocent? Montgomery scoffed. These savages have been raiding settlements and killing decent Americans for generations. I'm bringing civilization to wilderness, progress that benefits everyone. By destroying healing plants found nowhere else. By diverting water sources that sustain entire ecosystems, Sarah challenged. That's not progress, Thaddeus. It's greed disguised as advancement. Enough philosophy, Montgomery snapped, gesturing with his rifle. Step aside. The Apache dies first, then we'll discuss your future, which can still include considerable wealth if you're reasonable. Sarah didn't move. If you kill him, you'll have to kill me too, and then you'll have nothing. No company, no silver mine, no fortune. The legal papers are filed. Lieutenant Cooper has my documentation of the sacred sites. It's over, Thaddeus. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across Montgomery's face. Then his expression hardened again. Papers can be destroyed. Witnesses can disappear. The territorial governor is a reasonable man who understands the importance of development. As he spoke, Tall Hawk began a low, rhythmic chant, words in ancient Apache that seemed to resonate with the very stone beneath their feet. "Silence!" Montgomery shouted, his composure cracking. "He calls to canyon spirits," Sarah explained, recognizing the prayer from ceremonies she'd witnessed, "asking them to judge who speaks with true heart and who brings destruction." "Superstitious nonsense," Montgomery snarled, but his voice held a note of uncertainty. Perhaps it was coincidence, or perhaps the canyon truly was passing judgment. But at that moment, a tremor shook the ledge. Loose stones skittered over the edge as hairline cracks appeared in the rock beneath their feet. The dynamite blasts must have destabilized the entire cliff face, Sarah realized aloud. "We need to get back inside the cave before—" Another, stronger tremor cut off her words. The section of ledge between Montgomery and the cave entrance suddenly collapsed, leaving him stranded on a rapidly disintegrating platform with no escape route. His face transformed from rage to terror as he dropped his rifle and pressed himself against the cliff wall. "Help me," he pleaded, as more of the ledge crumbled away. Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed a protruding root and stretched her other hand toward Montgomery. "Take my hand." Tall Hawk caught her waist, anchoring her. "Why? Save him?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "Because healing means everyone," Sarah replied, straining to reach Montgomery. "That's what you taught me." Understanding dawned in Tall Hawk's eyes. Despite his wound, he helped secure Sarah as she extended herself further. Montgomery looked at her outstretched hand, then at Tall Hawk supporting her. A lifetime of prejudice warred with survival instinct on his face. Finally, he lunged forward, fingers almost touching Sarah's. Then the remaining ledge gave way completely. Montgomery's scream echoed through the canyon as he plummeted into darkness. Sarah stared in horror at the empty space where he had stood moments before. Tall Hawk gently pulled her back to safety as the entire cliff face began to shudder. "We must go," he said urgently. "Whole wall unstable now." As they retreated into the relative safety of the cave, Sarah's heart was heavy with the knowledge that despite her best efforts, she had failed to save a man who had once been her father's trusted partner. The canyon had rendered its judgment, but the cost had been high, perhaps too high. Dawn broke over the canyon, illuminating the smoldering ruins of the mining camp. Sarah and Tall Hawk, exhausted but alive, made their way down to the tribal encampment where anxious faces greeted them. Little Raven rushed forward, relief evident in his usually stoic expression. "Medicine Journal safe with Soldier Chief," he reported. "Many officials come from territorial capital." Indeed, at the canyon's main entrance, a contingent of cavalry waited, led by Lieutenant Cooper. Beside him stood Hargrove, clutching legal documents, and a distinguished gentleman Sarah didn't recognize. "Miss Lockwood," Cooper called, approaching with evident relief. "Thank God you're safe. We found Montgomery's men in disarray." "Something about explosions?" "A mining accident," Sarah replied simply. "Improperly stored dynamite." Cooper's knowing glance suggested he understood there was more to the story, but he merely nodded. "This is Judge Hamilton from the Territorial Court. He's here about your inheritance and some rather unusual land protection requests." The formalities that followed seemed surreal after the night's events. Hargrove presented official documentation confirming Sarah's ownership of Montgomery Mining Company. Judge Hamilton, unexpectedly sympathetic to their cause, examined Sarah's journal with genuine interest. "These botanical specimens are truly unique?" he asked, studying her detailed sketches of the star medicine. "Entirely unique to these canyons," Sarah confirmed. Their medicinal properties could benefit countless patients if properly studied and respectfully harvested. The judge nodded thoughtfully. The new conservation statutes might apply here, particularly with Lieutenant Cooper's supporting testimony about indigenous medicine. As the officials conferred, Sarah and Tallhawk slipped away to attend to more urgent matters. The tribal chief, ill for weeks with a mysterious wasting disease, waited in his lodge for the sacred medicine they had risked everything to obtain. Inside the dim lodge, Sarah opened her combined medicine pouch, containing both Western and Apache healing elements. Together, she and Tallhawk prepared the star medicine according to ancient tradition, grinding it in the stone mortar while singing the healing songs. To this, Sarah added a tincture prepared using her father's techniques, creating a treatment that bridged both worlds of healing wisdom. The ailing chief accepted their medicine with dignity. By evening, his fever had broken. By the following dawn, he sat upright, strength visibly returning to his once frail frame. "The spirits honor your courage," he told Sarah in Apache, which she now understood with reasonable fluency, "and honor your respect for sacred ways." 3 days later, as the chief continued to recover, official word arrived from the territorial capital. Judge Hamilton had issued a preliminary injunction preventing any mining activity in the designated sacred areas, pending a full environmental and cultural survey, the first such ruling in the territory's history. "It's temporary," Cooper explained, "but with your company ownership and Hargrove's legal maneuvering, we should be able to establish permanent protection for the most important sites." That evening, as sunset painted the canyon walls with amber light, the tribe gathered for a ceremony, unlike any in their history. The elders, led by the recovering chief, formally named Sarah Guardian of Sacred Herbs in their language, presenting her with ceremonial items symbolizing her responsibility to protect the medicinal knowledge for future generations. Tallhawk stood beside her, pride evident in his usually impassive features. He wore the tribal headdress of leadership, a position he had accepted reluctantly, but with deep commitment to preserving their healing traditions. "Two paths become one today," the chief announced to the gathered tribe and the small contingent of sympathetic officials. "Medicine Plant Woman walks between worlds to protect what must not be lost." As part of the ceremony, Sarah and Tallhawk's hands were bound together with a cord woven from both Apache plant fibers and silk thread from Sarah's Boston dress, symbolizing the union of their lives and healing traditions. Their commitment. Ceremony, neither fully Apache nor fully Western, represented something entirely new, a bridge between cultures built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Little Raven stepped forward, the first to acknowledge them as a united pair. "I learn both medicines now," he declared, "both strong, both needed." As night descended, Sarah and Tallhawk stood at the canyon's edge, watching stars emerge above ancient walls that had witnessed countless generations of healers before them. "Montgomery's body was found," Sarah said quietly. "Cooper says he'll be buried with proper ceremony." Tallhawk nodded. "All return to Earth eventually, even those who did not respect her." "What happens now?" Sarah asked, gazing at the vast landscape that had become more home to her than Boston had ever been. "Now," Tallhawk replied, taking her hand, "we teach healing to those who will listen, both ways, together." 20 years later, 1905, the Healing Center stood at the canyon's edge, its architecture a thoughtful blend of Western practicality and Apache traditional design. Stone buildings with large windows captured both sunlight and the canyon's spectacular views, while circular ceremonial spaces honored indigenous healing traditions. Gardens of carefully tended medicinal plants, some rare, some common, all valuable, surrounded the complex in concentric circles. Sarah Lockwood, now in her late 40s with silver, threading her once auburn hair, sat beneath a ramadar with a group of students. Before her lay the nearly completed manuscript of the combined pharmacopoeia of Western and Apache medicine. a handwritten book representing 20 years of dedicated documentation, experimentation, and teaching. The final section chronicles the proper gathering songs for the most potent species, she explained to the attentive circle around her. These must be memorized exactly as transcribed, as the vibrations of sound affect the plant's response. Among her students sat a diverse gathering: 2 young Apache women, a Navajo man, 3 white medical students from Eastern universities, and a middle-aged frontier doctor seeking to expand his healing knowledge. Most remarkable was the young woman carefully adding illustrations to the manuscript, Sarah and Tall Hawk's 17-year-old daughter, Nightshade Elizabeth, whose name combined both their heritages and whose face reflected the bridge they had built between worlds. In the distance, Tall Hawk led another group through the canyon, his tall figure still straight despite advancing years, the wisdom of a lifetime etched in his weathered features. The tribal headdress he wore now carried additional symbols representing his role as primary teacher of the combined healing traditions. Little Raven, no longer little nor particularly raven-like with grey streaking his hair, had become their most dedicated disciple and now served as director of field studies at the Healing Center. Under his guidance, expeditions regularly documented plant populations throughout the protected territories, ensuring sustainable harvesting and habitat preservation. As Sarah closed the precious manuscript, carefully binding it with cords made from plant fibers and leather, Lieutenant Cooper, now retired Colonel Cooper, approached from the main building. Though older and walking with a slight limp from an old cavalry injury, his eyes remained sharp and his dedication to their cause unwavering. The latest government botanical survey results arrived, he announced, handing Sarah an official-looking document. They've confirmed 3 new medicinal species unique to these canyons. Washington is considering expanding the protected areas based on your documentation. Sarah smiled, remembering the desperate night 20 years earlier when they had risked everything to save the sacred caves. What had begun as one woman's survival in the wilderness had expanded into a nationally recognized center for ethnobotanical research and cross-cultural healing education. That evening, as sunset painted the canyon walls with the same fierce colors that had greeted her first days in this place, Sarah and Tall Hawk stood together at the highest point of the medicine-gathering trail. Below them, rare blue star medicine flowers, successfully transplanted to additional protected locations through years of careful experimentation, glowed with ethereal light in the gathering dusk. "The book is complete," Sarah said, leaning comfortably against her husband's shoulder. 20 years of knowledge preserved for future generations. Tall Hawk nodded, his expression serene. "Not complete," he corrected gently. "Never complete. Each generation adds new understanding. This is how medicine grows." As if to illustrate his point, their daughter appeared on the path below, carefully gathering samples with precise movements that reflected both her father's ceremonial respect and her mother's scientific methodology. "She bridges the worlds even better than we did," Sarah observed with pride. "She never had to choose between them," Tall Hawk replied. "This was our gift to her." As darkness settled over the canyon that had first brought them together, Sarah reflected on the journey that had transformed her from a lost and dying woman to the co-founder of a healing tradition that now attracted students from across the nation. The canyon had indeed held both death and life for her, just as she had written in her journal during those desperate first days. Life had prevailed. Tall Hawk took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the familiarity of 2 decades shared in purpose and love. Without words, they turned toward home, where a new group of students would arrive tomorrow, more seekers to whom they would pass the precious knowledge that had once nearly been lost forever. Behind them, the star medicine continued its luminous, blooming in the darkness, a living testament to what could be saved when wisdom was valued above profit. and healing embraced across the boundaries of culture and time.